Thank you, everyone, for joining me for these live internet studies week after week. My name is Ariel, ben-Lyman, HaNaviy, and I'm the teacher of this hour-and-a-half long study. It's broken up into two parts, and I invite you to stick with me for the entire hour and a half. If you're just watching the YouTube videos, you're catching the break-apart versions where we're only talking about one topic or the other. But the entire show is broken up into two segments. Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events, is the first hour-long segment, and a Trinitarian response to biblical Unitarianism is the second 30-minute segment. So stick around for both. Okay. Wow, we made it to show 300. I've been looking at the numbers. Live Internet Study episode number 300. Hard for me to believe that I've been going that long. Well, in all reality, when I first started doing the shows, I wasn't numbering them. I was just doing different topics week after week. And then finally, when I got into about the 70s, I came up with the idea of doing multiple topics at once and combining them into one show. So I decided to call it Live Internet Studies. But by that time, I already had like 70-something shows under my belt. So I just started counting at like 73, if I remember, something like that. This is Live Internet Shows number 73. So if you go look at the YouTube playlist for the Live Internet Studies and go back to the very, very first one, it starts, I think, at episode 73. And sometimes people ask me, Ariel, where's episode 72 and 1 and 70 and 69? Where's 1 through 72? And my answer is, actually, they weren't listed as Live Internet Study shows. They're just the other previous kind of standalone topics that were part of my YouTube channel before I actually started to call them Live Internet Studies. So the name doesn't match the numbers, but we truly are on episode 300. So let's look at the topic in front of us. We've got some information on the screen right now that you can see before you. This is the eschatology topic schedule that we've been working from. And these are what are known as kind of long form study format videos, meaning it's not a one-off video that you're going to be able to get everything in one video and then the next week you get something completely new, like maybe your average YouTube channel. Instead, this is like a Bible study that you would follow either in a home or a sermon series that a pastor would do at your church. It means week after week, he's going to bite off a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And if it takes him a month, he's fine. If it takes him a year, he's fine. It encourages people to keep returning, to get more and more and more. And so I apologize to those people out there who wonder why I go so long. Well, I go so long because I want to be a thorough teacher. So that's my style. All right. We're in eschatology, and the topic we're in right now is the one that's in yellow, topic 12, Rapture Views, a final analysis. What I've been working from, let me jump over to this screen. What I've been working from are 4 different views of what is known as historic premillennialism, a version of end times that envisions a literal 1,000 years at the end of human history, when God brings history to a proper consummation and ushers in his kingdom. Historic premillennialism believes that the age of man, as it were, will draw to a climactic close with lots of signs and wonders and tribulation and a battle and the defeat of Antichrist, only to usher in the kingdom where Jesus returns to earth and establishes his kingdom for those who follow him. So of the historic premillennialistic perspective, there are 4 prominent views that are recognized today. If you look up on your screen right now, I've got in no particular order, but I'm going in clockwise from the top left. Pre-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation rapture, and pre-wrath rapture. And let me just draw. Basically, the pre-trib rapture in the upper left corner puts the rapture right at the very beginning of a time period that they call the 7-year tribulation. Mid-trib rapture puts theirs right in the middle of that 7-year time frame. Post-trib combines what's called second coming and rapture and places them both at the very end of that 7-year time frame. And pre-wrath rapture does something a little different. It puts the rapture past the midpoint, but not quite at the very end. So all 4 of these positions have differing timing sequences differing ways they interpret scriptures to what's going on with the rapture, if the question. There's also some other major differences in interpretation as to definition of terms, something I think that really separates people without even realizing they're being separated. Because if you just hear someone explain what do they think about the 7-year tribulation, right away it assumes maybe their definition of 7-year tribulation. Maybe that person doesn't hold to a 7-year. Case in point, we Prewrathers, the position I hold to, right? Let me just give it a little bit of love there. The position I hold to doesn't hold to a 7-year tribulation. Well, that looks like I'm putting a heart on top of the beginning of sorrows. We don't want to do that. Let's take that away. But the point I'm trying to say is, if at all possible, a suggestion I like to open up with right away when I'm dialoguing with people, whether it's via email or comments in my YouTube channel, and they start saying, well, I believe blah, 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 or why do you believe blah, blah, blah? One of the first things I open up with is I'll tell them the name of the position if I know what my position name is, or I'll ask them what's the name of their position if they have a name that they're aware of. And if they can't get that far, then I'll say, can you define your terms at least? When you say tribulation, what does that mean to you? When you say rapture, what does that mean to you? When you say wrath, what does that mean to you? Is there a Bible verse that drives your understanding? So these are things that I'm really big on. So let me just read real quick the kind of the definitions of what each one of these positions hold to. These are little things down here at the bottom. Pre-tribulation rapturists believe the church will be raptured before this final 7-year period known as Daniel's 7th week. It's that simple. There's a 7-year tribulation. The church is not promised to go through any wrath of God, which they interpret as tribulation. Therefore, from their perspective, the church must be out of here before meeting the Antichrist, before going through any tribulation that would be characterized by the 7-year time frame. This doesn't mean that they believe that the church won't go through any rough times. As long as you're living on planet Earth and as long as you're a Christian, you're going to suffer mockery, persecution, rejection, things like that. They understand that. Let's move on. The mid-trib rapture, reading this little part down here again like I did before. Mid-tribulation rapturists believe the rapture will occur exactly halfway through the 7-year period, just before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. So a lot of their theology is similar to pre-tribbers. Just cut that thing in half, put your rapture right there in the middle, and rescue us before God's wrath is poured out. In this way, we still don't end up going through any great tribulation, but we go through something that is in the middle of the 70th week that is recognized as tribulation. Okay, moving along. The post-trib rapture, reading this part down here again, post-trib rapture says they believe that the rapture will occur following the 7-year period known as Daniel's 7th week. This is why it's so important to get people to define their terms and know where they're coming from. Post-tribbers will say the rapture is on the far end. The rapture and the second coming are the same thing. The rapture is a going up and an immediate coming back down. This way we go through God's punishment and tribulation and great tribulation, but God has to protect us somehow, supernaturally. Therefore, we don't experience the kind of the punishment aspect of God's wrath because we're his bride. Why would he punish his bride? We're under the blood. We're forgiven. We have been, our sins have been washed away. There's no reason for God's wrath to reside on us, whether we're talking eschatological wrath in the 7th week, or certainly whether we're talking about final wrath on Judgment Day. God has excused us and forgiven us via his son's blood. Of course, it's his mercy and grace. It's not any works that we've done. So that's the post-trib position. And when I think about how diametrically opposite the post-tribbers and the pre-tribbers are, by the way, as I stumble over the words from time to time, I say pre-trib when I mean pre-wrath, or something like that, because they sound the same, right? Pre. Of the 4 positions, two of them have a pre, one of them has a mid, and one has a post. So often when I mean to say pre-trib, I might mistakenly say pre-wrath, and when I mean to say pre-wrath, sometimes I might mistakenly say pre-trib. So forgive me. I have some of you that highlight and you're like, hey, Ariel, at 15 minutes and 37 seconds into your video, you said pre-trib, but didn't you mean pre-wrath? And I go back and listen, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. All right. I'm flawed, okay? So cut me some slack. Just follow along in the context, and I appreciate you guys helping keep me accurate, all right? I'm okay with that. Anyway, the Pre-tribbers and the post-tribbers are just diametrically opposed, and yet both of them believe they're studying the Bible. Both of them believe that they're well-meaning. Both of them believe that they're following after Christ's words. Both of them believe that they have the accurate view. But neither one of them, I believe, is so smug as to imagine that they have the full revelation of truth. So keep your position healthy, keep it sharp, keep studying, but also give the, give the benefit of the doubt to the other guy who's also studying, who disagrees with you, because we're all studying truth. We're all studying the same resources. I don't think any of us are pushing a position that's outside of the Bible or extra biblical. Like, I don't hear any Book of Mormon views being presented, or the Islamic version being pushed, whatever version of Rapture is. That would be different if we're reading two different resources. But all four of these positions are trying to follow the Bible. So let's be cordial, and let's be Christ-like in the way that we're having these discussions. All right, going over to the pre-wrath view, let me just read these. I'm reading these little things down here at the bottom. Get out of there. So we got this part down here that I'm highlighting, that I'm reading right now. Pre-wrath rapturists believe the rapture will occur following the opening of the sixth seal of the book of Revelation. The church will experience severe persecution by the Antichrist, but will be snatched away before God begins to pour out his wrath during the day of the Lord. So those are the four positions that at any given time are basically open for discussion. Let's go back over to my notes here. All right, so we're dealing with Rapture Jews, the final analysis. What I had done last week is I created this short little essay where I was trying to convince post-tribbers to just switch over to pre-wrath already. And I listed 5 what I call reasons why I critique or do not hold to, meaning pre-wrath objections, to post-trib. This was a little summary table that I didn't read last week, so I'm just going to close out that section with this, read this real quick, and then we're ready to actually jump into a new topic tonight. So here's the summary table of the pre-wrath objections to post-trib. This is not an exhaustive list, obviously. I just collated 5 different reasons using partly my own reasons and part reasons from other, what I like to affectionately term classic pre-wrathers. But here's what I came up with. So reason number 1, wrath does not equal tribulation. And then I've got a biblical support verse. And the core pre-wrath critique is that post-trib conflates God's wrath with Antichrist's persecution. Okay. In other words, I think that wrath does not equal tribulation. I think there's a difference between the two. Satan's wrath is one thing. God's wrath is something else. And in time, I can develop why I believe this is the way it is. But for now, this is kind of an overview. Just know that this is one of the stronger tenets of the pre-wrath perspective. Objection number 2 to post-trib from me, a pre-wrather. Rescue before wrath. We've got biblical support for 1 Thessalonians. My core pre-wrath critique. No rapture rescue occurs in post-trib before wrath. Again, they see the church going through wrath, however, being protected by it. Thus, it's not necessary to have a physical deliverance from planet Earth up into the clouds in order to escape wrath. So that's why they don't have a rapture that occurs before the wrath is poured out. That's at least in some versions of the post-trib, in the classic versions or something. There are other alternate versions of post-trib that allow for a bit of a rapture yanking up into the air before maybe the bowl judgments are poured out, or this one 24-hour day of the Lord is poured out on planet Earth, or something to that effect, and then Christians come back down to earth or something. Point number 3, again, this is a summary so I can move quickly through it. The arrival of wrath in Revelation 6:17 with the Greek verb eilthen. Post-trib fails to explain what is recognized as the ingressive aorist meaning of this particular passage. When we go back to the Greek, what I demonstrated, not exhaustively, and I had the rest of it rating here down below in case people were ready to go into the more technical, but I didn't get any takers on or any request to do that, so I didn't read that part. but I wrote it. I had it ready. Basically, I, as a Prewrather, believe that we do definitely have an aorist tense verb there, which can be understood in one manner, but there's also a context that we call Ingressive. Ingressive refers to something that is opening or something that is beginning, that something that has its origin or beginning point, something that's beginning to unfold, and or the entrance point of something, like a train pulling into a station that's quite long. The front train is the entry part of the train, but as the train kind of moves past people, if it's not the front train, they realize it's not the entry train. It's still the train, but maybe it's in the middle part, right? The train has to kind of pull all the way into the station where the people can get off, but it doesn't just stop once the front part hits the station. It kind of has to, there's this big long string that's pulling other cars, so it has to keep moving for a little while until the full length of the train is at the station, and then it stops. So that's the ingressive nature of this particular aorist verb. Point number 4, an interrupted 70th week. In Matthew and in Daniel, we have our biblical support that I was listing. The critique, Prewrath allows a cut short tribulation, but Posttrib doesn't. A cut short tribulation. Prewrath says, per Matthew 24:22, which is by support given, originating in Daniel, that Jesus' words that unless those days were cut short refers to the Great Tribulation. It doesn't refer to the tribulation as a whole. If you think that there's a 7-year version of the tribulation, it doesn't refer to that, nor does it refer to the 3.5 years that Daniel spoke of, that was picked up by John in the book of Revelation, about the reign of the Antichrist. The cutting short doesn't refer to either one of those. The cutting short, by context, as far as I can tell from reading Yeshua's words, is very specific just to the Great Tribulation. He even uses a demonstrative pronoun where he talks about those days, the tribulation of those days. It seems to be the context is this specific time frame that starts at the midpoint of the week, but is interrupted and extends towards an indefinite time period, but God cuts it short. That's the way I read the verse. I'm trying to be as literal as possible there as well. And then lastly, number 5, and then again, this is a very short summary of what we studied last week and the week before, the chronology of Revelation. And this is a biggie, and that separates post-tribbers from Prewrathers, is the way that post-tribbers treat the book of Revelation. By the way, the post-trib treatment of the book of Revelation is not the only, I'm not just picking on them. Historicists also treat the book of Revelation quite differently than other rapture positions. So my critique was that post-trib's recapitulation model disrupts the narrative flow. When I say recapitulation there, I'm not saying that John doesn't go back and pick up some detail in some chapters. He most definitely does. The definition of that, I would say, would be recapitulation. However, what I'm talking about is that, generally speaking, if you think about the way the bowls, trumpets, and judgments, like for instance, let me go back over here. If you look at the way that the bowls, trumpets, and judgments are described in the book of Revelation, the model I go with is quite simple. And I need to clarify this, so I'm slowing down a little bit in this review. The model I go with in the Prewrath model says that as John describes the seals that he's seeing, they are initiating events on planet Earth that are heavenly, that have a heavenly origin. And so seals 1 through 7 are sequential in so much as they're numbered in the book of Revelation. When we get to the trumpets represent a series of events that are initiated by the 7th seal. But as you're looking at the picture here, don't be confused. It doesn't mean that all 7 of the trumpets occupy the same time frame as the 7th seal itself. Nor, when we get to the 7th trumpet, does it mean by this photo that all 7 of the bowls are collapsed into trumpet 7, because that then would mean that all of the bowls are also collapsed into seal 7. So there is still a sequencing that's going on where I don't know exactly how long each one of these instruments or these objects plays out. How long is seal 1? How long is seal 2? We're not given that duration. We do have some indication of some of them because it's indicated by the text. For instance, trumpet number 5 actually has time frame given to it, right? 5 months. However, my point is The Prewrath model, for the most part, takes the seals in the numbering order, lays them out sequentially, and allows for them to play out chronologically and sequentially across the time frame, not overlapping completely. So seal 1 and trumpet 1 and bowl 1 are not the same thing, etc., follow that logic. So that seal 7, trumpet 7, bowl 7 are not just a retelling of the same story. So here's a good way to think about it, and I mentioned this last week, but I'm mentioning it again because I had some comments in some of my videos and I had some questions. People were pushing back, and I believe they were misunderstanding what I was representing. In what I said last week is that if you think about the way that the Gospels are written, the 4 Gospels, 3 of them are synoptic, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John's a little bit less synchronized according to the other 3. But we still realize that it's telling the same story of Jesus. So what we end up with is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John represent 4 different tellings of one story. It's one man, yet there are differing details. Anyone who reads the Bible should be able to come to that conclusion that they're reading about one character, Jesus, Yeshua, and his life and times, culminating in his crucifixion, his death, burial, resurrection, his ascension, and his sitting at the right hand of the Father, his intercession. So we've got all of those major details that show up in all 4 of the Gospels, but when you read them and notice that one writer will bring out one detail, another writer will bring out a different detail, like from a different angle, and yet the words aren't all just copy paste, right? They even in Jesus' own sayings, the recordings of them sometimes have more or less details depending on which book you're reading, which is a beautiful way for the Holy Spirit to preserve the life and times of our Lord in a way that gives us the opportunity to study Yeshua's life in a very interesting way, where we don't just have one witness repeating verbatim what the other witness says. In today's courtrooms, we would view this as suspicion of rehearsing, where 3 or 4 witnesses rehearse their answers beforehand. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. What are you going to say? Are you going to say that? No. Here's what you need to say. All right, and they all rehearse their answers, and then when they go stand in front of the judge, when they give their witnesses, they sound exactly the same, and then the judge will suspect that there's some monkey business going on because you guys all have exactly the same story. Therefore, how can we trust you as witnesses? Well, that's not what happened. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all have like slightly different tellings, which corroborates and kind of supports the fact that they're all telling the same story, but from their own perspective, and it's truthful. Okay, how does that compare to the seals, trumpets, and bowls? Well, I don't believe that the seals, trumpets, and bowls should be treated like the Gospels. They're not just 3 versions of the same events. There are there's some themes that get repeated. There are certainly even some reused kind of judgments. You could say God kind of recycles, but he kind of he increases them. Like maybe at the seals, he might say 1/3 of mankind suffers this, but when you get to trumpets, maybe like half mankind. But then when we get to the bowls, it's like the full weight of mankind suffering under whatever punishment. So he keeps increasing the intensity. But something else, and I'll say this real quick and then I'll keep going because I don't want to spend all the time on this. One commenter kept pushing back as if I was saying that when seal 1 opens, it's enacted and then it closes. And then seal 2 opens and then it's poured out or enacted or does whatever, and then it closes. And then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Then when we get to trumpets, trumpet 1 is blown, the effects are felt on earth, and then it stops. And then trumpet 2. So that at any given moment, only one of the items is being felt by the earth dwellers. No, that's not the way I'm describing what's going on. What I believe is that seal 1 opens before any of the previous seals after it. Likewise with the trumpets, likewise with the bowls. So there's where the sequencing is felt. They're numbered for a reason, meaning they open in sequence according to the numbers that are given to us in the Bible. That's the plain understanding of what I'm referring to. However, after seal 1 opens, the effects of seal 1 are still present when seal 2 opens. So it's not that seal 1 suddenly closes. There's nothing in the text that says that Jesus, the one opening the seals, closes them. Nor is there anything in the text that's the trumpet that's being blown is suddenly retracted, or a bowl that's poured out is suddenly scooped back up. Nothing like that in the text is being presented. That's not really the natural way to understand the way these events are occurring. The natural way is understanding one happens, and then while the effects of one are still present, two happens, and then while the effects of 1 and 2 are still present, 3 happens, and so on and so on. Keep repeating. That's the pattern that I'm looking at. So that by the time we get to seal 7, all of the other 6 seals, the effects of them are still there. They're still present. God didn't take them away. Likewise in the trumpets. By the time we get to seal 7, the previous 6 trumpets have laid planet Earth to waste practically, and the effects are still there. I don't know if that means they're ongoing, but if there's a third of the grass that's burned up or something, then by the time we get to the seal or the trumpet or whether that's being described next, like demon locusts coming out crawling on planet Earth or something, the earth is still burned up from the previous seal, right? It's not like God healed the earth, or there's nothing in the text that says that God reverses the effects of any given previous activity before he moves on to the next one. So that's not what's going on. Likewise, when we get to the bowls, by the time let me say it very simply. By the time we get to bowl 7, all 7 of the trumpets and seals, the effects of them, for the most part, have either kind of left their damage on earth or felt their mark, or they might still kind of be a semblance of ongoing, although not completely. For instance, in trumpet number 5, like I mentioned earlier, which is found in Revelation 9, verse 5, it said that those demon locust creatures that come out and hurt, they're like a locust type of a demon locust, and they sting people on earth who have the mark of the beast. They sting them with this painful sting, and they're allowed to kill people, right? They only do this activity for 5 months, which means after the 5 months is done, they aren't allowed to do whatever they're allowed to do. So they actually have a beginning and an ending. They have a start and a finish. But some of the other stuff, where a great meteorite, whatever, strikes the ocean and turns the water into blood and all the fish die and things like that. As far as I can tell, the fish don't get resurrected after the next seal opens up or the next trumpet sounds or something. The fish stay dead throughout the rest of the time. So Earth is just kind of going through this more and more worse progressive judgment that as God pours out, to where he culminates at the very end with the 7th one, that everything else in front of it still ruined planet Earth. That's kind of the version I'm going with. And by the way, this is a bit different, if you notice, from the plagues in Egypt. I went back and read the plagues this week, and if you notice, a plague, right there was 10, there would be a plague that would happen on Egypt, like the frogs would be there, or the lice would be there, or the gnats, or the boils, or the hail, or something like that, and the locusts. And the plague would be there, and it might be there for a day or a few days, until Pharaoh cried, please, please, right? He cried uncle to Moses, please stop this. And in those cases, then Moses would either wave his hand or wave his staff or pray to God, and that effect, the plague itself would be removed, like the frogs would go away, or the locusts would be blown away by the big wind that blew them away into the EC or something like that, or the darkness that was on the earth would lift, the hail would stop, it would cease. The plague stopped, but the effects of Egypt's ruin of what the plague did, right? The crops were still ruined. The people, I imagine, still had pain from the sores, and whatever the locusts ate up, right? It was still gone. It didn't just grow back instantly. I don't know if the water returned to normal that originally turned to blood. Did it just turn back to normal? Did it turn back to fresh water? But my point is that at some point when you're reading the dialogue, the magicians realize that Pharaoh, Egypt is ruined. It's not like the plague came, God stopped the plague, and then Egypt got healed. So there's kind of two dynamics happening at the same time. One is that whatever plague is being enacted, Moses reverses it. He stops it. He brings it to a stopping point at Pharaoh's plea. Please stop this. I'm sorry. Please pray to your God to stop this. I can't take it. And Moses waves his hand. It stops. But Pharaoh doesn't repent. So Moses brings another plague, right? A different one. So that's one dynamic that's going on. That does not seem to be going on with the seals, trumpets, and bowls. There's no Moses waving his hand going, okay, let's start something and then stop it. We don't have any dialogue that talks about that, other than the ones like where the trumpets do have a limit. Like one of the trumpets has a starting point and ending point, something like that. The other dynamic that's going on is obviously whenever something bad happens to that in the plagues, it ruined a particular patch of land or a part of Egypt or a region where the effects wiped out the crops or turned the river to blood, or there was stink because of the frogs or something like that. So even though Moses waves his hand, I think the crops were still flattened. I don't think they suddenly just sprang back up just because the locusts disappeared or they just suddenly turned green again. Like the effects were supernaturally reversed. I don't take that. Meaning the effects of whatever the plague was were probably still there, so that in the end, by the time we get to the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, the other 9 plagues still basically ruined Egypt, right? The place is a wasteland. It's a mess. So that's, I think, what is present in the seals, trumpets, and bowls. So I wanted to clarify that. All right, I spent way too much time going over this summary.